Hello, my name's John Campbell, and I'm doing my History 325 project. I chose to do it on Western immigration and the immigrant groups that came to the Western United States and how they changed the West forever, and how they will continue to change the West forever as we have Mexican immigrant groups, Chinese, and the rest moving in every year, and changing the West culturally, ethnically. Um, so I started with Tom Paine's America, and I worked with that and showed that fears of other immigrant groups is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for 300 years nearly, as Native Americans did not like newcomers coming in and displacing them. Then I went with Lee and a little bit about Chinese exclusion and the history of that in the West. Obviously that plays a huge part. I'm a member of the Native Sons of the Golden West, so I had this book. And it talks a little bit about how they have a dark history of supporting exclusion and those kind of policies with the politicians in Sacramento, and working hard to lobby for that legislation that helped lead eventually to the Chinese Exclusion Act and other things that kept Asians and non-whites out of California. I also worked on The Mountains of California, which was John Muir's book, and in it he reflects upon coming to California and seeing it for the first time, and being an immigrant that walks over the Pacheco Pass and he sees the whole Central Valley laid out before him, and you can almost feel the euphoria that he had when he first saw the Sierra Nevada for the first time, and he's looking at what he calls the range of light. He even says right here, then it seemed to me the Sierra should be called not the Nevada or the Snowy Range, but the Range of Light. And after 10 years spent in the heart of it, rejoicing and wondering, bathing in its glorious floods of light, seeing the sunbursts of morning among the icy peaks, the noonday radiance on the trees and rocks and snow, the flush of the alpenglow and 1,000 dashing waterfalls with their marvelous abundance of iris spray, it still seems to me above all others the Range of Light, the most divinely beautiful of all mountain chains I have ever seen. So then I also went to Sweet Promised Land, which is a book about Basque immigration. I have a lot of Basque relatives that came here to work in the sheep and livestock industry. And this book talks about how they came here, worked hard. Their father, Dominique Laxalt, worked as a shepherd for many years, and eventually that family became very prominent in the state of Nevada. Robert Laxalt was a professor at the University of Nevada and started their Basque Studies department. His brother, Paul, was a United States Senator that was a very good friend of Ronald Reagan. So it kind of has that whole immigrant story where rags to riches and really very famous family. And Dominique Laxalt goes to Spain or France, to his hometown in the Basque Country, and he's sitting there and he realizes he'd changed. He was no longer a Basque man, he was an American, and that the mountains of Nevada were his true home, not the hills of Spain and France in the Basque Country. So it really is a haunting little tale about immigration and the realization that eventually you did assimilate, even though you didn't realize it until you went back. Which eventually leads us to my own family story, and on my wife's side, in a house we still live in and own in Plymouth, California. Her great-great-grandfather built it, and he was a very wealthy stockman that came from Switzerland and worked very hard. He built a dairy and a ranch way out in the middle of nowhere, in land that probably nobody wanted at the time because it snowed and it was not desirable necessarily in the high altitude. And he worked very hard, built a little empire of ranches all over the foothills and the Sierras, and eventually was rich enough to go back to Switzerland, to his hometown. So I found a letter he wrote from Switzerland to the Mountain Democrat, our local paper, in 1913, and I thought it was pretty interesting, where it says, describing him, Stefano Leone, one of our well-known and prosperous stockmen, started for Switzerland last month in company with his wife to visit the old home they had not seen in 50 years. He writes back to friends, giving his impressions as followed. Dear friends, when I left Placerville, I promised to write you from the place where I was born, so here it is. My wife and I are all well and found all our folks well. We left Placerville on the 9th of July and arrived here on the 27th of August. After a pleasant journey, we enjoyed ourselves on the steamer, which was better than any New York hotel I ever saw, and we don't get seasick. Those who don't get seasick who go second class. As much as I have seen of the country, it looks to have changed quite a lot since I left here 50 years ago, all for the better. Where a goat could hardly pass in, now they have railroads, and the place looks entirely different to me. The valley seems small and the mountains higher. But I'm not sorry for the money it took to see once more the land where I was born 64 years ago, and the people are very kind to us. But to make a long story short, give me California for the balance of my days. We expect to start from here in time to take the steamer La France at Havre on the 20th of September. When I left Placerville, I forgot to take my citizenship papers along, and I might have to show them when I come back, or might get held up at Castle Garden, New York, until I prove myself an American citizen. I have written for an affidavit and not going to start until I get it. I had the home papers follow me here, and so get the news. I was very sorry to learn of the big fire you had in Placerville since I left. We send our best wishes to all our friends. Stefano Leone, Switzerland, August 4th, 1913. So I thought that was pretty darn interesting and really telling of the American experience where he went to Switzerland, somebody in our own family, after being in America so long, and realized that he had changed and that California was his true home, not Switzerland where he thought he was from. I mean, the country that he lived in had changed him irrecoverably. So that's my little project, and that's what I worked on, and these immigrants basically in the conclusion did assimilate, and they will continue to assimilate, and they will continue to change California and the West, and who knows what we're going to end up with, but we should not fear this change because it's been going on for 250, 300 years. Anyways, have a good day. Thanks.